Okay, hello everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this conversation on climate change in Morocco, impact of and responses to changing climate pattern. Morocco is part of one of the world's regions most affected by climate change and water scarcity. The country's ecosystem has faced stressful circumstances in terms of water management issues. This has been driven by droughts, which are now effectively the new normal, rising water usage due to growth of water-intensive industries like agriculture, which accounts for 19% of the country's GDP, and tourism. Average temperatures have also increased, affecting crop performance and driving production costs. The Moroccan government, the private sector, and international actors are trying to address the situation through a number of different measures, including improving water management, such as investing in better irrigation and trying to shift to drought-resistant crops. But there's a lot more that needs to be done to ensure a sustainable future for the planet, for the country, for the population, and for affected industries. So we will dive right into this conversation with our three speakers. I am delighted to welcome them all here, and I would like to start by introducing them briefly. I want to introduce Fatna Ikram El-Fen. Fatna is a candidate for two master's degrees, one in environmental engineering at Suzhou University in China, and another in water management and in water and environmental management and engineering at Mohammed V University in Morocco. She is a co-founder of Youth for Climate Morocco, a non-governmental organization, and represents a number of national and international organizations on climate change issues. Second up, Wisal Ben Moussa. Wisal is a food industries engineer with degrees from Hassan II Veterinarian School and Agro Paris-Tech. Wisal has over 10 years of experience in quality control in the agroalimentaire sector. She is herself an agro entrepreneur, developing her agroforestry project, which she has been working on for more than 5 years. She is now the agricultural director for the startup Sand to Green, which develops an integrated model for agroforestry for arid environments, composed of endemic species irrigated by desalination of brackish water or seawater with solar energy and brine management. And last up, short and sweet, we have Hassana Bakhouch, is a Moroccan climate and security advocate. She is a US women's young peace builder and an aspiring conflict mediator. She strives to contribute to sustainable peace, security, and climate justice. Welcome, all three of you. Really great to have you with us for this conversation. And I want to start with a first set of questions, just to talk a little bit about the impact, give a little more detail on the impact of climate change in Morocco. And Wisal, I want to start with you. Can you talk us through the different aspects of climate change in Morocco? We've talked about water scarcity on different industries. Give us a sense of what other aspects are, maybe neglected, not talked about, and how can we try to understand those in the grand scheme of things?
Well, Morocco has been, like many other countries in the world, but specifically in Africa, and specifically what I like to call frontier areas. Why do I say that Morocco is a frontier area? Because we're between the Sahel, the African Sahel, and between, so we have a very specific ecosystem, right? It's an ecosystem that is more and more prone to desertification, more and more prone to aridification. So we're significantly impacted by climate change. And we talked about water scarcity. The climate change exacerbates in water scarcity. There's decrease in rainfall, increase in evaporation rates, rise in temperature. So that affects directly agriculture. I will come to that later. Then there is also impact on coastal areas with sea level rises, with temperature in the seas that are rising also, which affect biodiversity and thus marine life and thus coastal areas. I want to also talk about biodiversity and ecosystem and how climate change is impacting our unique and very fragile ecosystem already, including, forests, wetlands, mountainous region, etc. But specifically in the southern regions of Morocco, which are regions that are already semi-arid and that are becoming more and more arid. I want to stress a bit about agriculture. So how does climate change affect agriculture? It affects productivity, crop failure, leading to crop failure, reduced yield, decreased livestock productivity. There is a very change in rainfall patterns. And I will give you an example. I've been farming in the south of Morocco for a very specific reason, because we think that by challenging ourselves to create a better way to do agriculture, a more resilient way to do agriculture in those most affected regions, then we can export that model to more northern part of Morocco, and maybe export that model into Europe also, that are also affected today by this. So I want to give an example of what's happening in the south of Morocco. We went, for example, in the region of Gulmim Wednoun, in the Wadi Noun here. We went from flood farming. We had annual rainfall that were up to 150 millimeters, which was enough for the local population to do flood farming. Then we went to there was a decrease in rainfall. So we went into a more industrial kind of agriculture, where we would use like mega basins, huge, water basins, and the use of groundwater table that started on the, let's say, around 2000. And the groundwater table is today overexploited. And with the decrease of the waterfall almost by half, we went from 150 millimeter a year in the between 85 and 2000, and now we're down to like 70 millimeters a year. So this water table is not renewable. There was a drop in groundwater, and there is no high groundwater regeneration because of the decrease of the waterfall. And now, even this industrial agriculture, it needs more water, and this water is not available. And this is how it's affected. It affected the local populations first, and then it's affecting today the big, let's say, agricultural corporates. And now we're kind of stuck. We need to help the local communities, but at the same time, we need to create a sustainable and resilient way to still produce a lot of food for an ever-growing population in Morocco. And from a biodiversity aspect, there is a very notable loss in the fauna and the flora in the region. I want to talk about the argan trees. We're losing in our mountains more and more areas where we have this beautiful Micronesian ecosystem comprised of argan trees, shrub, forbs, etc. We're losing that more and more. We're losing some beautiful fauna of the region. I want to give an example of the Saharian black bee, which was one of the endemic bees of Morocco. So yeah, those are all let's say, impacts of climate change in Morocco, but specifically in agriculture.
Thank you, Wissal. That's excellent. I want to move on to you, Fatna, so we can drill down a little bit more on some of the affected communities, conversation around some of those affected communities that Wissal brought up a little bit. Talk us a little bit through. We heard a bit about the picture in the south. Are there any other communities that are really facing a difficult sort of circumstances. What are some of those immediate impacts? And where is the majority of the response coming from? Is it coming strictly from government, civil society? Is the private sector also doing something about this? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the private sector as well later on. But give us kind of a big picture.
Okay, so hello again, everyone. And first of all, allow me actually to take a moment to extend my appreciation for extending the invitation. So always actually a pleasure to be part of this kind of programs in order to reach to share the perspective. Well, as Ms. Wissal mentioned, actually, Morocco is a country that rely its economy actually rely on agricultural sector, and this sector actually employs more than 30% of the population, which is actually a huge number. And we can actually notice that there is actually a lot of severe communities impacted by the climate change, but particularly like the vulnerable and heavily affected people are the people who work in the sector of agriculture. So, namely, rural communities. They rely actually on agriculture for their livelihoods, and they are highly vulnerable to climate change impact. So there are therefore actually changes in precipitations patterns, increased drought, and shifts in growing seasons directly actually impact their agricultural productivity, leading to reduced crop yields and income. So these communities actually often lack access to resources, technologies, and financial support to adapt to changing conditions. And here actually comes the role of the government. So it's a responsibility to provide the tools, the knowledge to those people in order to improve their situation. For example, we can say encouraging like the rural farming communities to diversify their income sources, so that they cannot only rely on agriculture sector, so they can actually reduce their dependency on agriculture. So this can involve like promoting alternatives livelihood options, such as non-farming activities. I don't know, like for example, tourism-related venture or handcrafts. So by doing this, actually, they can have like additional income streams and act as a buffer during the periods of agriculture disruptions. Also, the government actually can promote. For example, promote the climate smart agriculture practice. By for example, providing some workshops or trainings to those communities, so that they can actually adapt to changing conditions. This, as I mentioned, include like adopting drought tolerant crop, for example, improving water management through efficiency irrigation techniques, and practicing, for example, soil conservation methods. So I think by giving them the tools and the financial support, importantly, I think they can actually enhance their knowledge and their skills, and they can actually adapt to the changes that they face actually during the bad, we can say, the hard periods.
Thank you, Fatna. Hasna, you work specifically on the question of women, and I think around the world it's been found that women are the first to feel the impact of climate issues and environmental degradation. How is that playing out in Morocco?
First of all, I want to thank the North African Policy Initiative and the Middle Eastern Institute for inviting me to this webinar. And when it comes to the question of how Morocco is dealing with the climate change effects on women, especially in rural areas, honestly, it's going like on a slow journey when it comes to policy-based initiatives from the government needs more attention. And not only Morocco, actually, this is an observation global wide. When it comes to conferences like the COP or the COI, conferences of climate, there is a lack of questioning about the nexus of gender and climate change. It's not often raised until recent times. Climate affects differently, equally, but also on some levels differently women, especially in Morocco, where rural women here are responsible of a lot of household chores, even helping their husbands in farms. They're responsible of food, of energy provision. And when there is this water scarcity and inadequate structure in rural areas, they find themselves in a position to find water, to find resources, and that can lead them to face great risks. Unfortunately, this is not all about women, it's also about little girls and children, often that, they need health service access, and due to climate, it doesn't work well. It's a whole system that needs to be fixed so that this question can be addressed correctly. The infrastructure, health services provision, energy, the protection of the water table when it comes to farm and agriculture, the type of pesticides used in farming, and the biodiversity protection. It's a whole thing that should be protected for this kind of, when it comes to this kind of issues. And even if we address this question, you'll find that it's all connected to each other, which makes it more complicated. There is attention when it comes to the Ministry of Women, Solidarity and Social Services in Morocco. They have some talks, but so far we need like concrete actions, like plans to address this.
Asna, can you give us a sense of what are some of those talks? Because from everything you're saying, it seems really the onus is just on women themselves, on these sort of local communities themselves to kind of adapt. What is the ministry talking about in terms of some support?
So far, there is the raising awareness when it comes to, first of all, girls in, girls units education, because in Morocco we have, schools or institutes, governmental facilities for girls to host. And I think so far they work on raising awareness in these facilities, and also external stakeholders, international organizations are also working with the government to shed light on these issues, especially the United Nations, and many diplomatic missions are also talking directly with the missions in that concerned about this issue. So far, when it comes to legislative institution, this is still in process to be discussed, and it's not there yet, and we hope it happens. It's slow.
It's a slow process.
Even not in Morocco, it's like so far I see that the whole world is still slow on this question, actually.
Absolutely. So I want to, as we are talking about government policies, I want to kind of shift the conversation a little bit more to responses and sort of government policies. But I also want to give a quick reminder to our audience. I would like to take some questions at the end of the conversation. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function to submit them, and we will take them towards the end of the conversation. But Hasna, let me come to you for sort of, again, a bigger picture of kind of overall government policies. You mentioned specifically about women and et cetera. The legislative process is very slow. Is there anything that's going well? Are there any areas where you see some sort of positive developments where there could be, more things are kind of happening faster? Explain that a little bit more broadly.
Yeah, it's from the last decade. I've seen the improvement and the how to say, the swift shift in Morocco's vision when it comes to renewable energies and the energetical transition into more clean energy. When it comes to governmental policies, we see that the government or the country did initiate the green strategy plan, and it's still going on, and also sub plans for hydrogen project when it comes to come to it as a renewable energy, and also the strong commitment that ministries or also institutions are giving this how can I say it? It's like an the operations that are now being made, sorry, when it comes to government policies, they are also highlighting the energy transition like wide and clear. And I think also when it comes to the laws and the policies about the management of waste, about the management of water, about the protection of the wildlife, of the sea richness, about the usage of transportation, I think these subcategories they are being tackled one by one by the responsible ministries and bodies. We also have the strategy of the national development, the sustainable development, that is tackling SDG 5, 7, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, which are interconnected. And I think
this is the new development model that was elaborated in 2019.
It's in line. Also, with the Paris Agreement, Morocco had made some targets. We hope they are reached by 2030. The target for 2020 was not, unfortunately, was not met. But we hope it does, especially with these, especially lately, there are a lot of initiatives when it comes to transportation. We see a shift from cars that use gas to
electric vehicles.
Yes, vehicles and and other resources for energy. But we still need to see the implementation and how to say it, the implementation and evaluation of these policies in real life. For example, one thing that I noticed once in my trip to Ukaimden, the farmers there wanted this let's say permission to change from farming apples to farming walnuts, because the type of the soil there needed another type of trees, and the water facilities in that place is, even if it's a mountain, there is a problem of reaching water. So I think that the government now should talk face to face with locals and understand their needs and cooperate with them. This is a very important point to raise.
Yeah, I know. Just to give a little bit of background, Ukaimden is the mountainous area outside of Marrakesh where there's quite a bit of farming. It's also a big tourist destination as well. So let me pick up with you, Fatna, on government responses. Hasna mentioned the need for more consistent implementation. Maybe the need of some resources, maybe the need of better coordination among different government agencies. How do you see that from your perspective?
Well, we're talking about one of the major environment climate change impact on Morocco is that we start actually notice that the problem of water actually start getting worse. So we can say that Morocco is a country that has long been grappling with the issue related to water, not only because of climate change, but also because as we can say it, the position of Morocco in as we can say yeah, I'm sorry. So if we go back actually to like years before, I can say from like 1920, we're gonna notice that Morocco actually struggled actually with the issue of water, and for years actually the government start actually affected start actually you know, given some importance to this topic by showing commitment to addressing either like climate change and you know, affected some implemented some policies. So yeah, in recent years, actually, the Moroccan government has enacted a number of policies that Ms. Hasna mentioned that aim to at improving water management and availability within the country. We can mention the National Water Strategy from 2050 to 2030. So that serves actually as a comprehensive roadmap, emphasizing integrated water resources management, efficiency, and also the infrastructure development. So the government has also enacted a national water law, like providing a legal framework of water governance, rights, and protections. So also another key policy is the pricing reform for water, which has been implemented for agriculture, industry, and even stakeholder like households. So the idea actually behind these measures or these policies is to encourage conservation and sustainable use for water, while also promoting the efficient allocation of water resources. Also, is true actually that some actually may argue that the pricing reform is too rigid or unfairly
too slow,
targeted certain groups. The fact remains that yes, so the fact actually remains that it is essentially for promoting responsible water use across the country. And for that, actually, we start notice like for the past, I can say for the past 2-3 years, Morocco actually start launching various public awareness campaigns, I'm sorry, to increase you know, awareness and understanding about water scarcity and the importance of conservation effort. So I think we should continue monitoring and evaluation and adaptive management so that we can actually you know, we can actually achieve the goals that we actually put in these policies and these strategies. And we need also collective action. We need to integrate, as Ms. Hasna mentioned, like people from all regions. We need actually to collaborate with stakeholders, with community, you know, civil society. All this actually collective work will lead us actually to an effective implementation and to a positive change.
Wissal, I'm going to come to you in a minute, but I want to follow up on the question of Morocco's water plans. And I think we've heard a lot about desalination plans that are currently in either in implementation or in planning processes. I've heard some people refer to them as aggressive, very aggressive desalination plans. How do you assess those, Fatma? What's your sense of what Morocco is hoping to do in terms of desalination?
I'm sorry?
Desalination plans.
Well, I see that Morocco actually start to go into this this one of the innovative, I can say, method. But the thing is, Morocco is a developing country, not a developed one, and this actually can cost a lot of money. And we need actually, yeah, it's good actually to invest in some of these, you know, this method or this technology in order to, you know, to efficiency talking about water, because as I mentioned, Morocco is an agriculture country, so it's really actually a lot on the agricultural sector, but I think it's a good and a bad thing at the same time, and I think we need to invest in other sectors in order actually to improve our economy, because if we start only focus on an agriculture sector and providing, as you said, and providing actually some solution in this sector, we will not actually achieve what we want. So I think it's a good and I think we need actually to reconsider our choice. Because it's gonna cost us a lot, and we already have some actually, yeah.
Yeah, so very costly, very ambitious. We saw not just the desalination plans, but also the renewable plans. I think Morocco wanted to generate something like 50%, 52% of its renewable energy. There is also a lot of talk about green hydrogen, or maybe different colors hydrogen plans. What do you think about this? How do you see these strategies? At what point do you think they're getting too ambitious and too costly? And what advice would you give the government if you were looking at this, and from your own sort of perspective?
Well, I want to just go back a little bit quickly on the government response, or the current response that we've been having to mitigate climate change. And I will take it again from an agricultural point of view, because for me, talking about climate change, talking about the drought and water scarcity, is talking directly about agriculture. Agriculture is the main sector that uses water, I mean, throughout the world. So when we have when we have a plan to mitigate climate change when it comes to agriculture, I mean, we would have like a beautiful solution to go ahead and be sustainable and resilient. Let me quickly go back to the government response. Some years ago, we launched the Green Morocco plan. That plan was ambitious. That plan helped infrastructure development, helped Morocco when it comes to job creation. It created a lot of employment opportunities in rural areas. But it was done by promoting agricultural activities and agro-industrial project, right? There was no place in the green plan to small-scale farmers. The plan was mostly focusing on large-scale commercial agriculture, and it was kind of overlooking the need and challenges faced by small-scale farmers. What we should know is that in Africa, Morocco is part of this statistics also. 80% of our food in Africa is produced by small-scale farmers. So if we're talking today about food security, we need to take care of the small-scale farmers. We need to take care of the local communities and the rural areas. Also, just a critique of the plan. The plan is not really environmentally sustainable, while it recognizes the importance of
it was very water intensive, right? We saw that was one of the issues with it.
Yes, very water intensive. There is no respect to ecosystem and biodiversity, and the plan should, for me, strengthen its strategies for climate change adaptation, including promoting, as my Hasna and said, including our promoting climate resilient agricultural practices, providing support to farmers affected by climate related risk. For me, it's a holistic approach. So today we have a new plan. We have a green generation plan, a plan that wants to be more inclusive of those rural population, a plan that wants to raise this new generation of middle-class farmers, or middle-class rural areas, as they call it. And it's a nice, I think it's a nice change from the Green Morocco plan. It's more inclusive, it's more adaptive, and it takes into consideration local communities more. Now, I'll get back to your to your question, Intisar, about the policies that the Moroccan plan to generate 50% of its electricity through renewable energy. The current status is that we made substantial progress in renewable energy development, especially in solar, wind power, hydrogen powers today. I'm based in the Gulmim Wednoun area, and there is that big project called the H2 Gone Valley, which is supposed to be one of the biggest industrial projects when it comes to H2 production. This, of course, will help us reduce dependencies on fossil fuel, decrease our emissions, because as Hasna said, Morocco is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, and we committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emission by 42%, I think, by 2030, something like this. And we, I mean, there are still challenges ahead when it comes to energy transition. For me, we need to shifting toward clean and sustainable energy is still a challenge in many sectors, like transportation sectors, industry sectors. There is still an issues when it comes to land and water usage for those projects. The large-scale deployment of renewable energy project, I'll come right after to talk about desalination. Those are large-scale projects, and they require significant land and water resources, right? And the thing is that
land is not cheap in Morocco. That's one of the issues. Very expensive, right?
But land is also sometimes, and in a lot of spaces in Morocco, land is community owned. So we find ourselves in a bit of a challenge here. For water also, we living through a drought, and some of those big, large-scale energy projects they require significant water resources. So a lot of civil society groups have raised concern about the potential environmental impact of this project, including land degradation, water scarcity. So for me, it is very important to carefully assess the environmental and social implication of those projects. I want to give an example on the big wind farms. Wind farms are amazing, right? Renewable energy, we have lots of winds in Morocco, everything is fine, but there is no biodiversity assessment. Large wind farm can disrupt the
migratory patterns of birds.
And that affects, as we know, biodiversity is that really interconnected, synergetic nature way of telling us that everything is balanced and perfect in nature. And while we only touch, migratory patterns, we're not only touching this. I mean, we're building a whole dimension where we're kind of breaking those biodiversity synergies, and that can be a very negative in many other areas. And my last point would be about the socio-economical impact. So the development of renewable energy project can have socio-economic implication, particularly for local communities residing, in the areas where those projects will be held. I already talked about issues as land expropriation, displacement, changes in livelihood patterns can arise. So for me, we need to ensure very transparent and inclusive decision-making process where we include local community, where we, when we want to use water for those large-scale projects, we should not be using groundwater because of resource sovereignty. The local communities are the one that have the upper hand on resources locally, and water is one of the main resources. I mean, we're talking about the water wars today. For me, and this is why we're going into desalination, and this is my last point on desalination. Desalination can help us not tap into this groundwater, which is a property of local communities, and their entire livelihood is based on this. But we need to be also aware of big scale desalination projects that can be disruptive to marine biodiversity. One of the main issues in desalination is the use of the management of the brine, which is a co-product of desalination. As for today, there is no environmental studies that shows that dropping or just brine into the ocean does not affect local marine biodiversity. So we need to be really, really aware of this, aware of land water usage, socioeconomic impact, and biodiversity impact before addressing those big scale projects that can be super benefic, but we just need to be mindful about those issues that can be related to those.
Yeah. So we need a little more studies, a little more empowerment of people who are able to conduct these kinds of studies.
And a bit of a more of a holistic approach. Let's not do what we did with the Green Morocco plan, when we had one approach. We wanted to decrease our exports, and we did good. We decreased our export, all right, but at the same time, for the last 10 years, we were practically exporting our water, and we were living a water issue locally. So we need to be mindful and have a holistic approach on this. And I think this is why it's very important to have this kind of conversation. It's important to engage with local communities, indigenous communities, and have them as part of any project that will be pushed out in their regions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a crucial point. I think so much of these actions has been sort of a top-down approach. And this is where you really need to kind of engage with the communities so that you can create a little bit more balance. The question is, how do you do that? Who are the right groups to do that? And how can you make sure that the government is much more sort of aware and sensitive to those concerns? Fatna, do you have any thoughts on this? And then I want to hear also from Hasna on this as well.
Well, I think the community and the NGOs in Morocco can actually play a vital role in raising awareness, because it's not just about government policies and strategies. It's also about people. It's also about the community who also have a hand on this. We need actually to be aware about the challenges that we're going to face if we didn't actually reconsider our manners. So I think NGOs nowadays actually play an important role in raising awareness about not only climate change and water, but in general about any environmental issue that we have in Morocco. The thing is, there's a challenge that faces those NGOs, that they don't have a lot of financial support so that they can actually reach a vast community. And during the years that I worked in social activism, I noticed that youth actually have the potential, have actually as I can say, the angst to take the action, to be part of the change by providing, by actually working with the local communities, by raising awareness. And this is actually something really important. And we need to focus on this. And we need actually to give help and provide some financial support to those NGOs so that they can actually continue working and continue actually assisting communities on the ground, as we say. Also, in terms of war issues, NGOs actually can provide education workshops to the some like local communities, for example, especially in rural areas, given trainings on sustainable water use. NGOs also can work with the local communities to develop and implement water conservation strategies and support initiatives to restore degraded ecosystems that impact water availability. Also, they can come up with some recommendations and some make policy papers to provide to the government, and the government should actually include those recommendations in their strategy. So to ensure better accessibility actually, and to increase their effectiveness in assisting local communities, NGOs actually should also focus on strengthen partnership with not only local governments, but also with the international organization and foundation that can help them actually, and also with community-based organizations and also the stakeholders. So I think by working together, these groups, and here we're talking about collective action. So I think by working together, these groups actually can develop like a collaborative, sustainable, and local specific approaches to address climate change and all environmental issues that Morocco face.
That's excellent. Hasna, you also want to weigh in on this?
Fatna said really like the main highlight that the government and also grassroots networks need to work on. But I would like to shed the light also on how the government and also international stakeholders and organizations in Morocco are working on encouraging the production of innovative solutions. I was part once of a program of climate-friendly solutions that is supposed to encourage social enterprises in rural areas that include also women, that also has as a target the protection of biodiversity, the water tables, and the ecosystem in rural areas, since Morocco, as Ms. Wissal said, the heart of environmental, environmental power and economy in Morocco is actually agriculture. So I was part of this experience, and this was also partially funded by the government, and it also, how can I say, it gave this sense of enthusiasm and to look up for the future when it comes to including young women and young men in these processes. I think it's fundamental to the advancement of our work on climate action. I see the shift. I see that also when it comes to a governmental appellation to projects inside ministries, there is this line of requirements that they should respect environmental frames, but we need to see this on real life. I mean, still, this is still up on the policy levels, but we are looking forward to see it happening in real life. I want to add something, even if it's not in the question. I just want to add up to something. When we talked about water intensive practices in Morocco, we all do notice that the water intensive agricultural practices are not in line with the water challenges that we have, and this can create a problem because realistically we need to outweigh like the problems that we have to produce any future renewable energy projects to meet the needs of the population of water and agricultural and crops and everything. So this thing, it's a gap, and I even personally, it's alarming for me because we're having two things, and it's threatening. So I'm also questioning, how can we amend both water scarcity problems and also improve the renewable energy projects without damaging our needs as a population. It's a vital answer to address, and I hope we can see that soon. And I think that's because Fatma said everything that needs to be done from the part of civil society. I see this shift also. The United Nations helps a lot of local organizations in raising awareness and also in implementing many innovative solutions, programs, and we also often hear about social enterprise. As I said, there is again clean project that uses, for example, pesticides. I mean, just a normal project that we worked on, but sadly there is no enough financial support to bring it to the real life. And this is another problem that was raised by Fatma, is that the lack of financial support. Mm-hmm. We had this program that is innovative. Simply, we wanted to produce organic pesticides from the nettle, a plant that is widely existing in Morocco. And also from fermenting that nettle, we can also use some products like vinegar, and we thought about including rural women in such factories to have extra income. But unfortunately, such ideas can get lost easily since the support is not there, and fortunately we didn't. So
No, but you bring up a really excellent point, Hasna, on the drive for innovation and who is really supporting that drive for innovation within the broader conversation about support for NGOs, etc. And Wisal, I want to hear a little bit from you. Why isn't private sector supporting innovative solutions a little bit more? You get to have the last word on that. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Fatna and Hasna, to talk about the NGOs, the community-based organization, the advocacy groups. All those are actively raising awareness about climate change and playing such a crucial role in mobilizing communities, organizing local initiatives. And I just want to have a quick shout out before talking about the private sector to those amazing NGOs that work on this. I'm in the South, and there is an NGO that does a fog harvesting project, which is a beautiful NGO called Dar Ahmed in the South. And they are doing beautiful work. But again, when it comes to finances, to financing their project, they're getting finances from out of Morocco. So this is a real issue that can be talked about. When it comes to the private sector, and yes, I think the private sector can also and needs to be supported, because it will and it does also play a very important role in the climate change action. As Hasna said, the Moroccan government has implemented various policies and incentives to encourage private sector involvement. There are some favorable regulations. There are some public-private partnership. There are some measures that aim to create an enabling environment for businesses to participate in the green transition in Morocco. So I'll give you the example of my startup. We are a green startup who basically wants to create the agriculture of tomorrow based on agroecology, based on agroforestry, based on the lower cost of solar desalination, but also on the compensation, the financial market of the compensation mechanism. So the carbon credits, biodiversity credit, impact, well, basically all the impact that can be sold, let's say, in this new financial market. We've been accelerated by a local program called Agritech for Morocco, and it's a government program. It really helped us really understand where we are setting up and understand the Moroccan ecosystem. But again, when we had to do our first fundraising, our pre-seed fundraising for the startup, we had a very, very hard time finding funds in Morocco, and we just finished some months ago raising 1 million euros. But we did that again using international funds. We've been funded by international VCs. But that's okay. That for me, it's not a real issue, because climate action is a broad international issue, and today a lot of investors, global investors, are interested in local solutions. But when it comes to policies, for example, in Morocco, we don't have a policy yet when it comes to carbon compensations. We need to work on this, because a lot of finance and financing and funds wants to come to Morocco and wants to create those green projects that at the same time have impact on social impact, biodiversity impact, but also that are economically viable, that are profitable. What we do in my startup is we are scaling regenerative agriculture plantations. We are scaling regenerative agriculture investment into profitable and ecological plantations. So for me, the private sector can be a big driver for the green transition. But it needs to be innovative, it needs to be resilient, and it needs to be sustainable. And solution exists. What we're trying to scale up with my startup is one of the solutions that answer the ecological or the environmental challenges that our country is living today, but also answer to an investment market that needs profitability. So both can be attained, and both can help us get more investment. But at this investment is an inclusive investment. It's a sustainable investment, and it's an investment that take care, that it's a holistic, I love that word, it's kind of a holistic investment. It takes care of the land, the people, the investors, and the financial market. And I think at the end of the day, we need to include NGOs for their beautiful capacity to be community-based, to raise awareness, to organize local initiative, but also we need to have private sector, the good private sector, a conscious private sector that can help grow economically our country while respecting environment, while respecting the challenges that we can have locally today. So I think the future is working together, NGOs, private sector, government, and setting up a web between those three organizations, let's say, and of course the government is responsible for putting out policies to help the private sector be more sustainable, or push the private sector to be more sustainable.
And that's a great way to conclude this conversation. We saw it's a nice highlight of where the opportunity lies, and action that is frankly, attainable. It's not difficult. So thank you very much for that, Wisal. Thank you, Fatna. Thank you, Hasna. It was a pleasure having you guys here for this conversation, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. I'd also like to thank our partners over at NAPI and the events team here at MEI for their support in putting this together. Please stay tuned for other conversations about Morocco and about the North Africa region in general. And be sure to follow our social networks and our website for more information on all upcoming events. Thank you guys again for joining us, and